And the job of, I think, governments, labor unions, and civil society, isn't necessarily to say it's a bad thing if you can get on your iPhone and order up a pint of ice cream at 11 p.m. while you're binge watching Orange is the New Black. I think the question for all of us is, how do we expand and grow and protect the middle class? How do we make sure that everyone can share in the wealth and the prosperity that our nations help create? And how can everyone who puts in a day of work look forward to a decent and dignified life?
What do you think the role of the union will be in this future jobs market?
I think you could imagine many things. You could imagine a role for the provision of benefits to people who might have 12 employers in a single day. You can certainly imagine a role for organizations of workers that stand up and demand certain minimum standards across geographies and across industries. American workers need strong organizations, and the absence of those organizations has resulted in a race to the bottom for wages in America. So I think it's, if anything, becoming more and more evident that having powerful, sustainable, and scalable worker organizations is something that we desperately need in any democratic and capitalist society. The question of whether or not it will take exactly the same form as Congress prescribed in 1935 when it passed the National Labor Relations Act is really a different question.
David Rolfe, president of the SEIU 775 Union of Care Workers in Washington State and Montana. So, the times they are a-changing, as someone famous once said. Who benefits from these changes? And do we really all want to be potential entrepreneurs rather than salaried employees? Debbie Wasco is one of the people who's benefited from the sharing economy. She's the founder of the British house sharing site Love Home Swap, and the UK government recently commissioned her to write a report on what the sharing economy means for Britain. I asked her, what's in it for all of us?
The important thing about the sharing economy is to remember that it's a very broad church. It's about people making money and saving money from the things that they own, their car, their home, their power tools, their clothes, and the skills that they have. And they're able to do that because of the development in online and mobile platforms with people that they've never met before. And that has been the driver of the emergence of sites like Airbnb, of businesses like Uber. And when we think about participants in the sharing economy, again, people are engaging with it in very different ways. For many of the people who touch the sharing economy, it's a way of topping up their ordinary earnings. But what you also have is people who are choosing to live and work in a very different way. And that's what's being described in the US as more of a gig economy, if you like, where people, and particularly, not exclusively, but often millennials, so younger people, are making a living from combining doing some Uber driving with being a tasker on TaskRabbit, with making some money from Airbnb. And in some cases, it's becoming more of a lifestyle choice.
You say it's a lifestyle choice, but for a lot of people, I mean, a permanent contract is hard to find in the economies of now. And they're being pushed into this type of employment, which is very insecure.
That's one perspective, but that actually has not been my experience of people who are participating in the sharing economy. And I think that this is part of the debate that's being missed at the moment, because there is a broader debate, particularly that which is running in the US, about the status of workers, about the rights of workers. For me and my experience, most people are choosing to live and work more flexibly. And what we're ignoring in this debate is actually asking workers what they want.
Most workers would say they want a secure job. They want something long-term that gives them stability, where they can predict what their income is going to be, where they can, apply for a mortgage because they've got a regular income. This kind of economy doesn't offer that kind of security.
With respect, I think that's quite a dated way of thinking about what workers want. And the beauty of these new online platforms, and bear in mind that this is a trend which has emerged in the last 5 years, is that we're giving people choices. And I think that what we are seeing emerging is the third way. And that is something that sits in between pure freelance employment and full-time employment. Now, there are some big questions there about what are the responsibilities of the platforms. Of course, it will be complex, and there are some big unanswered questions.
But the legislation just hasn't caught up, has it?
No, I think that's fair to say. And not anywhere in the world, and that's quite understandable, because the granddaddy of the sharing economy is eBay, and they're the people that got us comfortable with what is the mainstay of the sharing economy, which is the trust that we put in peer-to-peer reviews. So I'm able to trust a stranger's opinion on a home, a restaurant, whatever it is, because eBay has made that normal currency. And that is a 15-year journey. If you look at something like Airbnb, which has been the poster child for the sharing economy, and rightly so given its size, that business wasn't founded until 2008. So it is inevitable that legislation will struggle to catch up with that. Now, how that develops over the next 5 to 10 years, we don't know, but I feel what will absolutely be the case is that the legislation and regulation and the way we think about what companies, in inverted commas, offer to the worker will change. And I imagine that as time passes, and if I had to look forward to the sharing economy in a decade's time, there will be this new way of working that sits in between being completely self-employed and freelance and being fully employed. And I think that's the thing that we need to explore, bearing in mind that we mustn't stereotype that everybody wants to work in the same way.
Debbie Wasco, founder of the British house sharing site Love Home Swap. And she brings us to the end of this edition of Business Daily.
Hello, this is the BBC World Service, where The Essential brings you extracts from some of our most thought-provoking programmes.
We have to be guided by the facts, not fear.
Until we understand what that means, you haven't really understood anything.
The BBC's global exchange of ideas
What's shared on social media wasn't just the news.
Why do we do the things we do?
More from all those corners of the world later in the programme.
Today, it's The Essential from our own correspondent, the programme that brings you analysis from BBC correspondents, journalists and writers from around the world.
Sometimes you meet people who make you feel slightly embarrassed for not being as brave as they are, or as courageous, or as cheerful under enormous pressure. Khadija Ismailova is one of them. When we met, I had just been complaining about Azerbaijan's tortuous visa regulations. She was being threatened with actual torture if she didn't stop her investigations into state corruption. No wonder I felt lightweight. I met Khadija a few years ago at the radio station in Baku, where she was working, expecting someone pretty ferocious.